Okay, we're going.
Good afternoon from an America that is still in the electoral fever. Ballots are still being counted and there is still no clear winner of the presidential elections. Thank you for tuning in for a new edition of the Leon Feraru Conferences. I know how difficult it is for all of us to break off from the political news, from the electoral news, but we believe that sometimes it's good. It's a good choice to go beyond politics, because there are things and important things that are beyond and above politics. We still don't know the name of the winner of the presidential elections, but definitely we know the name of the guest of this edition of the Leon Feraru Conferences online. And not only do we know his name, but million others know his name, because he is evidently one of the most translated authors in the history of Romanian literature. An author who has received some of the most prestigious, important international prizes, a Holocaust survivor, and one of the great witnesses of the tragic history of the 20th century, one of the great consciousnesses of the 20th century in Central Europe, and not only in Central Europe. And of course, last but not least, a fantastic speaker, a true great causeur, as the French say. Norman Manea, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful and very intimidating presentation. I hope to be in the sense and in the mood of your presentation. And so I hope and I ask you to find the most inconvenient and the most tough questions which you can imagine.
And I just want to assure you that I could have gone over and over with your biography and with your personality, and it's a true honor to be in conversation with an author and a mind of your stature. For me, and I'm sure for most others, there is no surprise that you are rightly considered one of the great consciousnesses of Eastern Europe, courageously and eloquently denouncing, and for a long time, injustice, tyranny, anti-Semitism. How do you find that part of the world 30 years since the fall of communism, looking back to where we all come from?
For somebody who is my biography and who is my past, it's a big change. Even if this change doesn't mean a perfect present, a perfect contemporary happiness. It's not so, and as we know, we are facing now a lot of other very unpleasant and very dangerous aggressions from nowhere, in this case, a kind of cosmic aggression. I can say that after 30 years, the entire world changed and still didn't change enough. It is a new era. It's a new evolution, a very rapid evolution of the technology and of the electronic means. Still, the essential nature of human beings is still more or less the same, with a lot of temptations and a lot of mistakes and a lot of confusions that we encountered in other periods. Now, the entire map of the world is changed. We don't have more the Soviet Union as the greatest power. We have China, and we have partially even my new country, my exile country, the United States, that evolved itself, I would say not in the very best way, but certainly to a change and to a radical new perspective, which is a global one. What to say? You mentioned here some characteristics of that period, which is injustice, tyranny, and anti-Semitism.
That's right.
All of them are still here, with another face generally, and with another amplitude. I don't want to insist on any of this, because you certainly are very aware of it, but the tensions and the spiritual and not so spiritual populist aggression of the daily life are still very visible and very dangerous.
So when looking back, you are not totally satisfied with the evolution that we all have been witnessing for the past 30 years. So tyranny, injustice, anti-Semitism are still with us. And I will take this opportunity to talk about each of these topics, especially anti-Semitism, but because we are now looking back to a long history and also to a certain part of the world, our part of the world, I'd like to ask you about your feelings about Romania today. You have continued to write in Romanian. You have continued to recommend yourself as a Romanian author. Now, of course, Romanian author living in the United States, and also, say, a Romanian-American author to some extent, but still writing in Romanian, very active, very present in Romanian cultural life. Looking at Romania and also looking at Romania in an historical perspective, what do you make you still long for Romania, and what do you make, I don't know, when you think of Romania, want to forget about it?
There are a lot of things to forget, and there are a lot of things not to forget, because our life is, especially if you are a writer and a man who tries to think about the reality, are not simple. And the danger of simplification, especially in a speech as we have now, a dialogue, is quite sensitive and here with us. I would say that the Romanian reality is more difficult to simplify than others. It's a complicated reality. It is always a reality which is moving without clearly in what direction. So now Romania, I was there in the last years, but not this year. I don't know exactly the situation. Looking to the papers and to some dialogues with friends there, I understand that the situation is not yet wonderful. It has a lot of shortcomings. It has a lot of dangers in its daily life. So we are more or less used to this type of situation and to this type of country. My country, I always said, was the Romanian language. This is a big advantage in a way. First of all, because it's a wonderful reality. I was in love with this reality since I came back from the camps in 45. I was 9 years old.
Wow.
And then I fell in love with this reality. And I am still more or less in love. And this should be a reason for envy for any wife, for any lover, for any great friend. I'm still there. I'm still there with this love, which is not a way of simplifying my relation with my country, but it is a way of taking my own biography with a very serious approach.
For you, literature was always a crucial thing. Language was always important. Romanian was always important. As an author, as a writer, witnessing the sort of diminishing of general interest in reading, in books, the lack of circulation, lack of interest. How do you sense this? How do you perceive this disruption? Is it something real for you? Do you suffer from it? How do you negotiate this new situation with regard to the author, who is no longer one of the pillars of the cultural, the center of the cultural life, but one of the many artists or many producers of symbols and ideas and characters and so on?
I came back from the camps in 45. I was 9 years old at that time. I rediscovered the world, the banality of the wonderful world of the daily life, food, books, jokes, school, which I didn't have before, or I had it in a very shadowy way because I was in the Russian school for 2 years in 44, 45, and I came back. So I started anew in Romania in 45. I fell in love at that time with my old new love, which is literature and Romanian literature. My preferred author at that time, and I don't dare to say that it's the same now, because many things change, was a Moldavian writer, Ion Creang. I was totally in love with him. When I discovered him first, I received a book for my birthday in July 19. I was at that time in Fălticeni, which is a city close to my own city. We had a lot of relatives there, and because when we came back, we didn't have where to live, and they took us in. And then for my birthday, I received as a gift from my parents a book of stories by this Moldavian Romanian writer. I spent an entire afternoon with him and with the book. I was totally thrilled by what I discovered because it was a world which was and was not the work which I saw in the daily life. It was another language. It was a charming, special, miraculous language. And the stories themselves were extraordinary. So I read this book with great intensity, and this was my start in this second life, or the post-mortem life, if you want to call it this way, which woke me up to art and to the daily life. I remained faithful to him until this day. There are many, many years, many decades. Meantime, because I was a very intense reader, I discovered other writers, other books, and I
Many
read
other writers.
what
Many other writers, I would say.
many other writers, and good and great writers from all over the world. And still my relationship with him and with his work remained essential, because it was the first great step to be reborn, in a new life, which was still the old life and the new life. So this was a restart for me after the first exile, because I had several exiles, as you probably know. And
That's why you write so well about what it means to be in exile, or what exile means for not only for a writer, but for a person in general.
Absolutely, but it means for a writer who had already in his childhood this great experiment, if we can call it this way. And in my case, this was one of the reasons why I remained stubbornly in Romania. My entire family left immediately after the war or afterwards. And my parents couldn't leave because I was the only child and the only boy. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave because my country was there, my language, which I dealt with it every day, and I was obsessed by it. So, but when I left, with great pain, with great hesitation, and with great sorry, I was already 50. So from 5 to 50, it's a long period. And generally speaking, at 50, you don't make such big changes, especially when it's about your culture, your language, your creativity. So I arrived in this crazy new country, totally confused, and I didn't want to come to America, to be honest. I would have preferred to stay in Europe, in France or in Germany, with places where I knew the language. And suddenly I arrived here without any language, mute, and without any real communication with a life around me. So I was surprised, enchanted, afraid. So this everything combined to my structure, which was of a, generally speaking, a timid guy. Yes, you were very, I understand, happy with my irony and my sense of humor.
That's right. Everybody is. I mean,
the compensation. This is a compensation for my missing things. I was not a very active guy, although I studied engineering. Was one of the big mistakes of my life. Again, because I tried to adjust, I tried to be like other people, but I was not. And I failed, and I think it was normal that I failed. But now all these failures were very useful for my second preoccupation, which was writing. But as you said already, I write still in Romanian,
Right.
and this says a lot because Romanian is not English or German. It's a kind of exotical language, but it is my language and my homeland. I am very close to it. I am very troubled by it because this is my daily dream and my daily work. Of course, here I adjusted in 30 years. I tried to adjust and I succeeded partially because only partially was possible.
I think you have succeeded quite well. You are an emeritus professor at the Bard College, one of the best liberal colleges in the United States. Lucky for your students to have had a professor of literature like you. And also when you moved here, even if you were 50s and you were still struggling with the language, soon after you became an author that pushed to the best-selling lists here in the United States. So I would argue that you have had quite a successful career, and for good reason.
I am thank you very much for this very pleasant and promoting way of taking me in.
It's true. I'm not living in the post-truth world. I'm in this respect, I still want to dwell in the truth world. This is a pure truth.
Thank you. I can say, as you remember, that I said it even in London when I was received in the English British Literary Society, Literary Foundation. I even said it there about my relationship with my country and my language. Now, you may ask me if after the camp, as a child, which was a horror and a daily danger and a great risk, especially for a boy which came from a very affectionate family. Right. He was like a little prince there for everybody. And suddenly he was taken out and put in a camp, first in a train for animals, and then he received in an empty place with all the dangers in the world. Now, after this disaster, coming back and trying and being, in fact, extremely joyful and extremely happy with a new reality which I suddenly discovered: books, food, nature, friends, all these things in a very rapid discovery, because this is the age, the puberty age, when you are eating the reality with great hunger. And this was my reality too. Of course, I had and I lived to the confusions of the moment. First of all, spiritually, ideologically, I didn't know fairy tales. I was not told as a child fairy tales. My parents didn't have time and didn't have the right approachment in order to tell me fairy tales. So my first real fairy tales was communism. And I fell in love with this utopia. It was a story which promised happiness, promised total happiness to everybody, and very soon and everywhere, So I fell in love with this fairy tale, but I was not a stupid boy. And in some 4 or 5 years, I woke up, I looked around, I understood that it is a huge and very painful difference between the utopia, which was sold to us daily, and the reality, the daily reality which we lived, we and other people around us. So this was the beginning of a process of lucidity. I looked to the reality with much more lucidity and with a very critical eye. This is how started to look also my literature, because my literature was mainly not about fairy tales or wonderful love stories. It was about my daily life and the daily life of the people around me. This was at that time a dangerous topic, because the system, which was a smartish system, I must say, was very happy to let us read and write fairy tales without underground meanings, because this was very dangerous and the censor was very attentive and professional about this.
Unfortunately.
But it was not about the daily life. Daily life was, as you certainly know, and I know that you know, a kind of inferno. The people lived as they were able to do. And for better or for worse, the Romanian reality was, and I assume it still is partially, an opportunistic one, where the main quality of the people was adaptation, adjusting, surviving. This was not bad. People needed intelligence, needed power, needed intensity for confronting this reality, confronting its big problems. So the fact that one day after the end of the dictatorship of Ceausescu, the dictatorship, almost all the party members became strong critics of the immediate past of communism was not by chance. It was a way of surviving that the Romanian people proved in many, many critical situations. And it was in this too. So you could laugh about the caricature of this change, but it was in fact, if you thought more about it, a very dramatic one. And people went to it with regrets, with a feeling of guilt, with a need of adjustment. So it was not a simple reality. It is not today, and it never was in a country as Romania, probably not only as Romania, in many other places. But I lived that reality. So I know about that reality, how it was. I tried as much as possible to keep my integrity. This was one of the big mistakes when I selected my profession, because I was a good...
Non-ideological, right?
Yes. I was a very good scholar, a very good student in the high school. So I had the privilege of entering at the university without exam because of my grades. And I selected a profession which was a symbol of the day, which was an engineer. Although I was better at the Romanian literature than at mathematics, I was good at mathematics too, unfortunately. So I entered the faculty, a very difficult one. We were 126 people, and we graduated 24.
Wow.
This was a huge, huge work, a huge effort, and a great, great intensity confronting something which you don't like, but you still do, and you do it more or less well because you promote it. So these are a few happenings in my youth. When I left Romania, as I said, I was 50 already. I had a grant in West Berlin, and I tried to be at the level of the grant, which was not easy. My Bukovinian past helped because I knew German, or at least almost well. So it was easier for me to deal with the daily realities here. Then I went to this great world of pragmatism, which is our capital. I was very afraid of America because I didn't know the language and because the pragmatism of this universe was frightening for me. I arrived here as a child, and I remember that I received the money for my grant at the bank. And when I first went there to take the money for the first month, I was totally confused. And the woman who accompanied me from the institution which gave this grant looked to me and followed me if I am able to be at the level of the happening. And more or less I was, but only more or less. So I entered another world with other rules, with other forthcoming and shortcoming, which I discovered step by step. And it also educated me to be again skeptical about everything. So I started to be very skeptical about America, about its wonderful project and its daily fairy tale, which was very theatrical and childish. So I am here still because I aged, as you know, and as you see, in a place which was not mine. The good thing of this change, of this mutation, was the fact that America is a country for everybody. It's a country with hundreds of languages, religions, ethnicities, and I had the hope that at least my very special and not very pleasant ethnicity will not be more here such a big problem. It was not, indeed, but it didn't disappear. Because you have a question where you ask me what I would like to forget and what I would like not to forget. I would like to forget and not to forget my past. Both are extremely important for me because I always place this complexity of mixture between good and bad, between horrible and wonderful. And this, both sides of this, I discovered and rediscovered in all my quite tough experiences.
Do you think that America has changed a lot since the late 80s when you first came to the United States, and now do you think it has it's very different from the country the Eastern European author discovered in the second half of the 80s?
It changed, certainly it changed. And it changed not for the better, in my opinion. This new capitalism, very smartish, very able to manipulate people and ideas and realities, advanced, and around us we have today, everywhere in this great country, because it's still a very great country, these contradictions and these challenges. The great weight of technology and of a rapid communication put a special imprenta of the daily life in America, and the need for profit in a capitalist society, in late capitalism, which is not a very wonderful fairy tale, because it's based on profit and it's based on exploiting and manipulating people for your own advantage or for the advantage of your enterprise, which is the most important thing here. All these were difficult to swallow. Now, if I swallowed them or not, you will tell. Look to me and tell me if I did or if I didn't.
Was it better to be a writer in the America of the 80s and 90s and a writer in contemporary America?
It's difficult to say. The problem in America, which is usually directed to profit, to randomment, to all these things which are judging to pragmatism, evolved itself. Of course, you find in America places and publishers and magazines, very small and almost unknown, which are promoting experimentalism, which are promoting originality and so on. But they are almost mostly invisible. The great market of the book, of the literature, of creativity is a place, a noisy and very visible place. To enter there for a little guy from Romania is not very easy. I'm still here, and by chance or by effort, I entered this world. Right. I remember when I first received the McCarthy Prize, and I was called by a guy from the foundation and told me that I have this prize. I didn't know what this prize is. So I said, yeah, but look, I never applied. He said, you cannot apply. Oh, I see. So I saw a new face of this country. And of course, this prize and other distinctions which I received were very encouraging and were big steps to adjusting here.
Because indeed your books have enjoyed an impressive circulation. I mean, most of you, and especially in the 90s and in 2000s, I think there wasn't any other Romanian name that could have come close to your reputation and to your stature in.
It's true, but if you know me a bit, and you already know me a bit, yes. You know that I'm not this fighter, and I never was. So it was for me a kind of miracle, which came from nowhere, because I'm not a religious person. So I didn't think that it came from heaven. I knew that everything which comes from earth and from the environment. So it was a great, great success for me and a great mood of revitalizing my qualities and my hopes.
I should say, as a cultural diplomat, it was a fantastic chance for Romanian culture to have such a successful writer with such a great circulation. It was more than beneficial, I can assure you. But of course, this fundamental tragic experience of your life and starting your life in coming of age, I would say, in the camps, a very traumatic and transformative experience. You have known anti-Semitism from early on, unfortunately, and you have known him all your life, and you have learned to discern it. You have learned to fight against it. How concerned are you with anti-Semitism today, looking around you, in the United States, in Europe, in Romania, anywhere in the world?
It's a dark reality, which is extremely confusing, although it has a very clear message, a too clear message. As I already said, I lived it at a very early age when I didn't know what means to be a Jew, what means anti-Semitism. I was totally, how to put it, a clean child. When I came back from Transnistria, I was very decided to forget about everything, because it was a new start, which I enjoyed extremely, everything. But then reality came back in a way or in another. When I left Romania in '89, the Romanian daily reality was very impregnated with the old nationalist anti-Semitic feelings. And I am reluctant, I must say. I was and I am, despite my status as a fighter. I'm extremely reluctant to teach on this horrible subject, to touch it. It's not easy for me. Still, I did it because I thought at a certain point, because it's impossible to avoid it more. No, because my opinion is, and it might seem strange, and it is strange to many of my Jewish friends, I think that not the Jews should fight against anti-Semitism. The Jews should say it if it's impossible to be silent, and in my case was. But the reaction, the rejection, the critiques of this nightmare should come from the environment, not from the Jews. Of course, the Jews are the victims, but the role of the victim I never liked, I must say. And I preferred not really the role of the great fighter, but the role of a lucid, not spectator, but witness. This I was, this I still am, without great hope in a change. I'm quite skeptical about the future of human beings. I know that it comes from the earth, not from the Himmel, not from the sky. It comes from the
Ourselves.
collectivity. What?
From ourselves, right?
From ourselves
Something
and
that we
our
do to
environment.
ourselves.
Yes. So it is a product of the human destiny, if I may say so. It's extremely horrible. It's very dangerous. It's a daily obsession, especially for people who went to it, not one time, but again and again and again. Because as I told you, I left Romania despite the fact that I didn't want to leave. It became impossible when I left. It became impossible to nationalism, to a kind of crazy authoritarianism and cult of the stupid leader. So we see it everywhere, and we see it even now here partially.
We, as you know, we like to keep away from politics, and we are very strict with these rules. So we won't get into politics. But since we are going through a time of major transformations all over the world, in Europe, in Romania, in the United States. Since you have acquired, and rightly so, the reputation of a sort of sage that uses a great life experience and not full of unpleasant things, but also of pleasant things to share it with the rest of the world in a sort of detached, ironical, full of humor way. I'd like to ask you about contemporary America, beyond and apart from politics, regardless of who's the winner of the elections. What do you think in this society should change, and what do you think it should remain the same?
People are here as everywhere, extremely influenced by the daily reality of their life. And being pragmatic, as I already said, they are more preoccupied and obsessed with daily details than with the great principles of freedom, of liberty, of happiness and beauty. It happens everywhere. But here, because we are in the new world, America brought a lot of novelties to the human history. Nice. It was a country that, through its constitution, hundreds of years ago, proclaimed the equality of everybody without necessarily claiming a sacred principle. By human nature, it says there that we are all equal and that we deserve an equal treatment. Of course, America is far away as any other country, but maybe even more, than to apply in the daily reality these high principles. Still, it is here an old new belief in justice, in freedom, in a right of choice, a right of your own choice and your own way of living. This is quite well respected in this country, although the forthcoming and the bad reaction, official and not official, by the common people is not always wonderful.
You are, of course, a well-known writer. Your life means literature. You write all the time. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are interested, and I see that there are questions because I want to remind you that this is we try to do it as interactive as we can. So we take questions and we try to ask questions whenever we have the time. So some of our viewers are interested in, because they haven't learned about a new book by you in quite some time. They want to learn what are you writing, if we can expect something a new book soon.
You should speak with publishers about this, and perhaps a bit also with my wife. But it's true that I worked for several years on a new book, which is a kind of eccentrical type of novel, which deals mainly with the problem of exile, from the very old biblical time to our daily reality, and to the dangers which are today in this world so different, so rapidly moving to a new unknown reality. So what do we know? Why do we hope? It's not easy to say. I would only mention that in the Jewish religion, which I am not interested otherwise than culturally, because it's a very interesting spiritual document, they say that God went himself in exile. In the moment then his people ended in exile, he was with them there. If it's so, this is a shadow which goes also to my book, although it's not a religious spiritual book, but it is a book of a guy who was always preoccupied with these human questions and with the human's uncertainties.
I'm sure your admirers, and there are plenty, are eager to see this book, and we definitely at the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York would be most proud to participate in the launching and also host a presentation of the book when it comes out. Of course, we've talked about anti-Semitism, we've talked about human nature, we've talked about rich destiny, but traumatic in parts. But there is other aspect of your life that was very important for you, and that was friendship. You have had great friends, you have a cult for friendship, you are wonderful people to be around, and I can attest to that myself. You were good friends with Philip Roth, very close to him. How do you explain this great friendship? Were you alike? Were you different? What was this friendship based upon?
It's a very good and difficult question, because it's related to something which is very close to me, and usually things which are very close to you are difficult to analyze. My relation with him started when I was in Berlin and when he was in London. And I wrote him a letter about the Romanian literature. And I knew there, and I had it even with me, an anthology of Romanian contemporary literature, short stories. And I suggested him to include in his series also Romania, because of course, as we may assume, Romania was not there. And he was very nice. He answered me immediately. He didn't make any reference to this proposal, and he was not interested in it. But this was the start of a dialogue. And the dialogue was between a Jew, very Jewish as he was, and a Jew who was almost Jewish as I was, coming from another place, another country, another continent, I would say, a place from which also his parents and grandparents came. So he was aware of the Jewish reality in Eastern Europe and very interested in it. Now, we were not the same. We were different, but it was a channel of communication between us to spirituality, to jokes, to humor, to a very similar way of taking life with a kind of distance and yet very much involved in it. This is how he was. This is how I was. The differences between a little Jew from Eastern Europe and the big, I used to call him the big American gangster, the Jewish gangster, is not little. The differences were very big. He was, of course, interested in this exotical kind of biography. I was, of course, interested in him and his books and his projects. And at the beginning, after I learned a bit of English, he used to give me all his manuscript to read and to have a discussion with him. Wow. So I was very shocked and surprised and intimidated because I was not prepared for this kind of test. Right. But we remained friends, which means that it was not a total disaster.
Your critique was well taken, right?
I assume so, although he never used too much my observations, my critical observations. So this friendship evolved, and what I certainly learned from him was the rejection of cliches. He was very keen about this. And I started to be also very keen about this. It's a big danger in literature, in art, in every spiritual enterprise to end up in a cliche. This was also in questions of Jewishness, of anti-Semitism, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And now, although he died, we are still close because he wrote before dying a letter to the president of Bard and asked for a place in the Bard cemetery next to me. And he argued that he doesn't want to be bored and he would prefer to have a dialogue with me also in the afterlife. And my president, who had a good sense of humor, of course agreed. So now he is resting in the Bard cemetery and I have a place there next to him. Maybe he is waiting for me or not, but anyway, this is where I will be.
Well, on this note, I can only think to wish you should meet with him as a distant future, as as one can hope for. Thank you very much for this fascinating conversation. There have been much more topics that we could have tackled, but unfortunately, our time is up. It's good to see you that you are. It's good to see that you are in such a good shape, that not shaken by the pandemic that is still raging on. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Good luck with your projects. We look forward to reading your new book. Also for our viewers, thank you for watching this series of conversations that deal with transatlantic affairs and highlight personalities that are equally, and topics that are equally relevant on both sides of the Atlantic. And also keep watching the other online events that the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York is producing. If you want to write with us, please note that our addresses have been changed. So please use the office at rciusa.info, because although we are based in New York, we are a cultural institute for the whole of North American subcontinent. Norman Manea, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your exaggerated good opinion about me. All the best.
Cu plăcere. It's even better now.
Okay.